the New York Artists Collective podcast. This next one's about.
It's silly how much joy that gives me. Hello and welcome to the New York Artists Collective podcast, This Next One's About. Now, this is a podcast where we interview an artist to discuss the creative songwriting process behind one of their songs. I am your host, Stephanie Manns, singer-songwriter and one of the New York Artists Collective producers. Now, as you'll be aware, during quarantine and lockdown, we have been taking our podcasts live to our Facebook page. And if you're watching it now, then yes, you will know all about this. But we've been doing this to find out how our artists are doing with this whole situation, and trying to find some ways to help, giving tips about doing live stream gigs, and generally broadening the format and taking in some new ideas and finding out lots of ways to do new and different things. But anyway, now before I introduce our guest this evening, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge everything that is going on in the world right now. It is a lot. And I want to say that here at the New York Artists Collective, we stand with our POC friends. We are absolutely against racism, white fragility, and white centering. And as such, I don't believe it is our place to comment on such event. So in 2 weeks' time, instead, we will be hosting a podcast show featuring our POC friends within our New York Artists Collective community, as we feel that elevating their voices and giving them space at this time is the right thing to do. And I will be posting more information on that in a week or so's time. Now, this evening, hopefully we can bring a good news story or two from the work that my good friend, singer-songwriter Matt Butler has been doing with his nonprofit, the Just One Foundation. So let me bring him in. This is Mr. Matt Butler.
Hey, everybody. How you doing, Steph? Good to see you.
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. I'm impressed with the technology with the StreamYard here and how you could bring me in from backstage like that. Yeah, well done.
I'm rather impressed with myself, if I'm perfectly honest with you.
Well played.
So how are you? I can see that you have foregone a couple of haircuts or two during quarantine. And famously, I called you Teen Wolf the other day on Instagram, which I felt I could get away with, which was rather fun.
You got away with it cleanly, smoothly. I think it was the Teen Wolf emoji that you found that I was most impressed by, to be honest.
Yes, I know. And thank you for reposting that. That was very gracious of you, shall we say. So how has lockdown been for you? What's been happening in the world of Matt Butler? I know that you're still busy, going to school. You're still busy with your foundation. What's been happening for you?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think, like you said at the very beginning of this, what I heard, I want to just acknowledge quickly that obviously there is quite a lot that's going on in the world right now. And, it's some pretty important and serious stuff. And I think it's great that you're going to be doing an episode specifically, set up to address that, especially, in some time when, we can kind of get some other perspective on it and so forth. But I'll say that, the entire quarantine has obviously been a pretty unprecedented and wild experience. And it's weird. It's been going on for a long time, as everybody knows, and time has blurred for me to a certain degree. And, I when quarantine began is sort of fuzzy. I got very used to it. There were elements of quarantine that I'll not so proudly admit were very already similar to what my life looked like, prior.
Such as?
Well, on one level, I isolate pretty naturally. That's not something that I need to be forced to do. To choose to sequester myself. And then a certain type of work or study or habit it wasn't a drastic adjustment for me on a certain level. I think that what's really weird is that I feel like I've gone through quite an arc throughout this process, emotionally or personally or spiritually, and I almost feel nostalgic already for certain moments that took place during quarantine. There's certain events or certain nights that I remember, or certain experiences when it was first getting started, and there were certain times where I felt very kind of cocooned by the quarantine,
Mm-hmm.
and I also felt like there were times when sort of the radicality of the whole thing made me really reflect on what was truly important to me, and I felt like I had some of the curtains drawn back, or the veil lifted a little bit on some of my own, some of the rat race that I feel I participate in on a normal basis. That was kind of like, the sun popped out from the clouds a couple of times, even though there was a lot of, there still is a lot of fear and anxiety, but I just felt like I was more present. And now that the quarantine seems to be coming to its conclusion, a very intense and dramatic one, obviously, with everything that's taking place this past week, but it does feel like things are getting, ready to shift into the next thing. I'm like a little afraid to go outside, to like be back, and I'm a little bit, my head is already geared up into like kind of the next level of like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? How do I get this figured out? Get this thing right? Get this thing. And I'm more projected into the future than I was, say, a month ago, where I think I was much more present with myself. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think, going in and coming out, there's certain levels of anxiety. It's sort of the anxiety of everything slowing down and going, what am I supposed to do? And then now it's the anxiety of everything ramping back up and trying to pick it back up with pace and fervor, and, getting back into music, and, getting back to shows and earning money again and all of that good stuff. So I definitely hear you.
Yeah, the financial element's definitely been, an interesting thing. As someone who makes the majority of their living on live performance, having that revenue stream sort of disappear for an undetermined amount of time has definitely been anxiety inducing. But I also think it's, kind of made me dig into other, like try to develop other skills that I wouldn't have developed otherwise. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. So what have, and I think there's a lot of creative people who feel this sort of pressure to learn, create, sort of come out at the end of this with a new skill or something like that. But I don't, I try to sort of remember that I think, coming out and just surviving is enough. But it's wonderful to hear that you have, developed some skills. So may I ask what you have been learning?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff, man. I would say that was something that I felt at the beginning of quarantine was like a big trap that I would easily fall into. I remember like the first week of quarantine, everybody was posting things like how Shakespeare wrote King Lear while quarantined from the plague. And I remember thinking that like all these people are going to think that they've got to, produce King Lear by the end of this thing, which to me was, it was just a transference of the pressures that we already kind of put on ourselves. And to me, it struck me that the moment in time was asking for something different. It was like a forced Sabbath on some level. And I think the quarantine also has had a bit of an initiatory quality to it. But I do know that there was that anxiety to maintain productivity of a certain kind, a very specific, kind of one-dimensional form of productivity. But I would say that, skills that I've developed, like I am in school, which has been the biggest blessing that my music school, let's give a shout out to the Collective School of Music in New York City.
Your good friend, Bob?
Yes, Bob Burke is a fantastic teacher, mentor of mine. I really have a tremendous relationship with all of the faculty there. And actually, I've gotten closer with a lot of the students since I've been in quarantine, and we've been on Zoom classes together. I didn't speak to people anywhere near as much when I was in person. That's what I'm saying. I'm isolation, quarantine. Comes very naturally to me, Steph.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty, pretty introverted guy. But having class, I don't know what this would have been like without that. I'm so grateful that the school kind of pulled this amazing emergency maneuver and became, ready to do everything online super fast. And,
Yeah.
so everything from like what I'm, sight singing and learning to read music and then learning Ableton and Logic and those kinds of programs, that stuff that like if I wasn't quarantined, like I can't think of like any other circumstance that I would boot camp myself through Ableton in 5 weeks if I wasn't stuck inside my apartment. But I'm pumped about it.
Well, I don't know what Ableton is, but I can certainly appreciate learning new things.
I
I
don't know
mean,
what it is either.
this whole thing that we're doing now via this, new app and the sound effects and all sorts. I've had to learn signal inputs, and honestly, I was pulling my hair out. But we learn these new things, and there are benefits to it, and I'm sure as you progress within your music career, you'll kind of look back and think, oh, well, I remember I learned this thing during quarantine. So it's, I appreciate how hard.
I've never looked. There's no point that I look back and say I learned that during quarantine. Not yet. This is the first time that that's happened.
Okay, well, hang on. So we're here to talk about art that serves.
Right.
And I was so glad that you agreed to do the show, as you always do. So thank you very much. But also, we've been thinking more intentionally, I think, about these podcast episodes and what we are trying to bring to people. And it's not necessarily just kind of giving our music, but also kind of giving a bit of ourselves as well. So art that serves. Mr. Matt Butler, you are a man who certainly serves. You tour prisons. You have started your own nonprofit organization, I should say. At home we call it a charity. You guys here have all sorts of names for it. And more recently, you came out with a Mother's Day documentary film called Mother's Day Miracle.
Yeah.
Now, I watched it recently, and it is such a beautiful film. It is 10 minutes long. I've just posted it on our Facebook page if anyone wants to watch it after the podcast, obviously. But it is incredibly moving, and you follow the story of one woman, Jenny, who was previously incarcerated, and when she got out, and it's this sort of story of her first Mother's Day out of prison. And why don't you talk about it? But firstly, I'm so it's beautiful that within about 4 days of, and the purpose of the film was to raise money, and which you did, and you raised $11,000 for renovations for a Place of Miracles cafe, which seeks to rehouse and rehome and launch women back into society after their term is finished.
Yeah. Should I jump in there, or?
Please do. Yeah. I had nothing. I mean, that floors me, and I am just so amazed by the work that you're doing. So please tell me about the film, and if you want to kind of start at the beginning of, how and why you started this nonprofit.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for. I started to almost think I was going to tear up while you were talking about it, and I really appreciate that it resonated with you, and thank you very much for your consistent and constant support. I remember being on stage with you and you elbowing me to talk about the foundation, and I just, do you remember that? And and I just, yep. I appreciate that it means something to you, so thank you very much.
Matt, let me tell you, it means something, and I'm sorry to interject, but it means something to a lot of people. It means something to many people whom this nonprofit helps every single day. So please know that it is very, very, very meaningful.
I will cry now, but I'll try not to. I'm going to get it together. The nonprofit officially came to, it was created in the summer of 2018. I actually got the official tax, the status, the 501c3 status from the IRS while I was on the Vans Warped Tour, which was kind of a wild thing. I remember getting an email while we were evacuating the Jacksonville fairgrounds because they were either that or it was Atlanta, but it was a venue that was flooding because it just rained like crazy. And I don't know, something about rain always kind of makes me feel like, there's some kind of omen that comes with it. But I had started performing in prisons 2 years prior, in 2016. And, initially it had all gotten started because I wrote the song Just One, which is where the name the Just One Foundation comes from. I wrote the song Just One for a film called Generation Found, and be forever grateful for that opportunity, and to Greg Williams and Jeff Riley, who made that film, for all the work they did and for giving me the chance to write that song. And that film was about teenagers struggling with substance abuse disorder and recovery high schools. So it kind of like put me in a world of advocacy and social justice and mental health. And, I'd certainly struggled with my own set of issues, but throughout my past, but I'd never really been surrounded by people that were really like working in those fields in that kind of capacity. So it was like a huge amount of like just very eye-opening, and it put me in a lot of people's spheres. And I had the opportunity to play for a lot of different folks. And eventually, I was given the opportunity to perform a show at the Albany County Jail in 2016. And, the reality is that I've written a lot of songs about some of my own personal struggles and about the struggles of people that I knew. And I played this show in a jail, and I was really scared to do it. I felt really self-conscious. I felt very out of place. I felt like what are these guys going to possibly think of me coming in there and playing songs? I thought I was going to get booed out of the place really fast. And it just didn't go anything like I thought it would. It was like they were such an incredible audience, and I suppose that's my fault for presuming that they wouldn't be, and that's not necessarily fair. But I was surprised at how awesome it was, and I would say that it wasn't just that one show. The sheriff actually brought some news crews to that concert, and it got posted on Facebook, videos of me playing that concert, and I was already sort of touring with Generation Found, and so all these people that were sort of following the film and following that movement and following loosely what I was doing started to ask me while I was in their town or in their city if I would also, like while I was there to play a college or play a film premiere, if I would also go in and play a county jail or if I'd play a prison. And I always said yes, and they just were like, it did not take long for me to completely 100% prefer playing the, not that I didn't love playing all those gigs, but like I liked playing the jails, man, more than anything else, way more than any of the gigs. And as an artist, part of what to sort of center on the topic here, this idea art that serves, as an artist, I think, there's this primary desire to feel seen, my sense of what I try to do is that I have an internal experience, an internal landscape that I try to manifest somehow externally so that I can feel more connected to other people, and let them know like this is what I'm experiencing. And, and then when there's some sort of, there's a reciprocation, I just don't feel isolated. I don't feel alone in the world. And that does tend to be my default setting, as a person my whole life. I've tended to feel kind of outside and cut off. I've never felt that sense of purposefulness in anything I've ever done in my entire life, I don't think, as I did when I was playing those shows, for those folks that were incarcerated, and the way that they connected with the subject matter, and the way they connected with my story, and the way they connected with, I think the fact that they just like appreciated that I was showing up there. It's not like they were getting a concert every day, So on one level, it didn't matter what I was singing about or how good I was or anything like that, Like they weren't getting a lot of entertainment, but I just never felt that good about being an artist. I've struggled to connect at all times of my life, and that was this one time where it just things blew open completely. And not only did that happen, but it organically expanded very fast. And for the longest time, this has changed more recently, thanks to my good friend Tommy Demonkoff at the New York DOC. But I never had a Department of Corrections credentialing. I never had a single volunteer training. I never had any kind of seminars or orientation of any type. It was this pure word of mouth thing that they were like, this guy's playing these shows, and I would play one jail, and that sheriff would tell another sheriff, or a social worker would tell a social worker, or a counselor would tell another one. There are all types of people working within that space, and it just, before I knew it, it was like, it was kind of all over the country, and
yeah, and you did like a whole tour. You've done two. How many tours have you done?
I've done a couple. So, I mean, the first thing that happened was 2017. A good friend of mine named Sarah Thompson, who's in Ohio, who I'd done some work with prior. She runs an organization in Ohio called OCAR, Ohio Citizen Advocates for Addiction Recovery. And we'd done a few events, and through a connection of hers, a nonprofit in Ohio that had been running, they're closed now actually because of the quarantine, but these therapeutic communities in state prisons, and they wanted to know if I'd play a show in one. And the conversation kind of changed into like, will you just do will you visit all of them? And then, so in the summer of 2017, I did this short tour of like a week-long tour where I did 7 state prisons in Ohio, like every day. And so it was just this totally like life-changing experience, as far as everything about it. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I'll ramble forever about this if you don't cut me off. So
that's all right. I'm enjoying listening to you. So I've done a couple of, I do hospital shows every now and again, and I mostly do them at children's hospitals. And it is so interesting to play for kids. Thank you. I mean, it is one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. And, because kids don't care who you are. Some of them don't even want to hear you. They're like, no, I don't want it tonight, and so it's just, all right, fine. And you move on to, and, it's so interesting in terms of like whether they want to hear you or not, and like how you feel seeing them and their reaction. And sometimes they're really not bothered, and sometimes they're over the moon. And you could go in and practice this whole, you've got to do covers in these hospitals, so it's songs that they know. And it's so interesting to see them just jump up and down at something like the Bare Necessities. And it's adorable, but it's one of those where, you'll go onto a cancer ward and you'll play for these children that are, terminally ill. And coming out of that, there are a lot of emotions when you're kind of doing something like that. And I come away from it still very mixed. I feel great that I've been able to bring joy to some people, but I also, come away with, some of my own feelings of sadness. And I'm generally at the end, I'm probably a mix of energized and also exhausted. And I wonder what that's what you go through as you are performing and as you are connecting, and then come the end of that day or the show, what do you feel?
Yeah, no, that's it's taken me a lot of time to even get perspective on how I've felt about certain things. But I certainly know what you mean, and I think that that's an incredible service to do that. My experience with, the physicality of it, I put myself in, I've been through at times some pretty brutal touring schedules where, if I'm working with certain organizations and they're, I used to do these tours in Michigan where I've done 4 shows a day for 5 or 6 days in a row. And like real shows, you got to drive in between them. And it would be pretty standard for me to play 3 shows in a day. And there was even times where I'd play 6 or 7 because I'd play a county jail where they wouldn't be able to put the populations had to stay separated. So a county jail might have 5 or 6 pods. So it's a different unit, a different housing unit for everybody that's there. And, and I would feel like I would want to visit all of them. And inevitably the shows would, we'd talk and I'd play 5 or 6 songs in conversation, and it would go 45 minutes to an hour. And I'd do that 7 in a row because there'd be 7 pods, so I'd be 8 hours or 7 hours in in one of these county jails. And it took a lot, and without any kind of amplification or anything too. It definitely was a little bit straining on the old vocal cords, but emotionally, it's incredibly draining. Depending on, I mean, it always is, but there's also certain attitudes that can contribute to some more resilience than others. When I first began playing those shows, it's interesting. The thing about service, as I understand it, service is meant to reduce one's sense of self-importance, to reduce one's sense of egocentricity. If it isn't, then if it's not doing that, then it's something that needs to sort of be re-examined as far as it being an act of service. That's why primarily, genuine, true service on a lot of levels, is, or like the truest form of service is usually anonymous service, because there's no way of receiving anything in return for it. You don't get something necessarily back except for the intrinsic altruistic reward for doing something for other people. And we're talking about some pretty like high level spiritual mastery at that point, when you really do something without expectation for someone in return. But what I would say is that in my beginning experiences playing in jails and in prisons, the reactions were very positive, like I described. And there's some videos on YouTube of people really, cheering and having the experience of playing a state prison and having 100 guys, that are potentially, kind of tough guys, get up and give you a standing ovation. And people crying in those shows, showing that kind of level of vulnerability and emotion. It's such a, I can't describe how powerful that was for me. But it had its effect, on my ego as well, and as far as the way that it tweaked my sense of self-importance, and personal grandiosity and egocentricity. And I think that that's one of the amazingly, geniusly insidious ways that the ego works. It's like it'll put on whatever clothes it needs to put on in order to get back on stage, So on one level, you can be, humble, or you can be, I'm the most humble guy in the room, and it's like, your ego, rather than seeking to be, I'm the smartest guy in the room, now I'm the most giving and loving. And so I started to believe, I think, that I had more power to be and do things than I did. And so when you put things on your shoulders that way too, the level of exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, spiritual sickness, mental illness, all those things that can arise from that. I had to learn experientially, how to sort of observe my ego kind of growing back, as a result of doing service at a certain point. So
does that not conflict with the fact, or, the necessity to market or advertise your nonprofit in order to help it grow and help others with it?
Oh yeah. I mean, welcome to my brain every day. I think of, it's a huge level of conflict, because I'm aware that, on some level, the larger my own platform is as an artist or as a person on social media, then the more reach I have potentially, to affect a change. But yes, what does that mean for me as the, person attempting to do the service, and my own spiritual seeking, my own sense of how do I grow in selflessness? How do I continue to reduce my own sense of self-importance, while promoting myself? So I'm massively conflicted about it all the time. And when you had said that, you kind of enjoyed that I wasn't in the film Mother's Day Miracle, I was very happy to not be in that film, for that reason. So that's something, that's a line that I walk, because I don't, maybe I should just get a job, at the Department of Corrections, and just do an arts program, for volunteer services like that. There are people that do that, and they do amazing work, and they're incredible people, and they don't necessarily post photos of themselves doing it on Instagram the way I do. So I I question my own motives brutally all the time to an extent that it's probably very counterproductive and draining energetically on a lot of levels. But that's something that, I mean, yes, the answer to your question is yes, to say the least.
Well, no, I love that about you. I think you're a very thoughtful and intentional, I was going to say man, but artist, I think, is probably the better term, because, you are, and that's really where your art comes from. And there's a lot of thought behind it. And I think when I listen to your music, and quite honestly, it is such a joy and a privilege to be able to sit next to you on stage and watch you perform it. And because not only am I getting to see you perform, I'm getting to see the audience react to that. And there is something kind of actually so special about the seat that I have next to you as I'm watching it. And I can see the way that people connect to you, your story, your lyrics. It's really a joy to watch. So, thank you again for that.
Well, thank you.
Now, you're going to play your song, Just One.
Yeah.
And I will get to watch it virtually and see people also watch it virtually. So it'll be, I sort of have my seat, but virtually, as it were.
Well, I'll also just say that I loved those shows that we played together as well. And that was such a sort of like fortuitous thing, because we didn't really know each other the first time we played. And then I don't know if we thought it was going to become like a series and then, what it's a real friendship. So I think it's been a real gift, for me to have that stage next to you as well, and to watch people experience your music and life is always full of surprises in that way, and it's very, very wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely. So this song is like one of those things where I don't tend to believe that the songs are, my own. I kind of feel like there's songs that, I feel like I don't write them so much as I like try to create conditions where I can like let them kind of come through me. Mm-hmm. And then they very much like have their own lives and identities. And this is a song that I feel very grateful for, because the lyrics have given me something to try to live up to. It's, the lyric sets a high bar, and it's good to bring that into a show sometimes, because it reminds me of what it is that I'm doing there. And this song, like literally, this song has taken me all over the country, and so I'm grateful that it's given me those legs. So here we go.
Okay.
I think I asked too many questions. I know I'll never understand how to help all those around me. I am just one man. There's so many who feel helpless, that there's just too much to be done. But I know it makes all the difference. That revolution has begun. If I can help just one, and he can help just one, and she can help just one, if we can help just one. I'll put my heart into my labor, and I'll burn my back under the sun, and I'll share the harvest with all my neighbors. I'll work until my hands are numb. If I can help just one, help just one. She can help just one. Yeah, we can help just one. I always gave to the collection, always hoping I'd get something back. So now I'll offer this reflection to all the mourners dressed in black. Lord knows it's so hard to pray when mercy only comes to some. We seek forgiveness when we rise each day, because our work is never done. If we can help just one, help just one. If we can help just one, if we can help just one.
That was lovely.
Thank you very much.
It's such a lovely idea, just to, like, helping just one person and like what that means.
Yeah, well, to me, you know, in a situation when I think about like the film, you know, Mother's Day Miracle, and you know, a woman like Jenny, and what it means for her to be able to show up for her children, and you know, and have a holiday with her children, and what that means to her kids, you know, and then what that will mean to everybody that like her kids then, you know, touch in their lives, and just sort of the, you know, that it's certainly not an original concept, that pay it forward kind of extrapolation of one kind gesture, you know, and what that can really do and what that can unfold as throughout the course of a person's lifetime.
There was something that Jenny said, and it was something that her daughter had said to her when they were going to A Place for Miracles cafe. And her daughter asked what a miracle was. I don't want to spoil this for everyone for the whole film, but there was just this lovely, sweet little thing. And her daughter said, "A miracle? We need to get one of those."
Yeah. That was such a moment, man. When I know that when our filmmaker, Sam, you know, when Jenny said that and they got that on camera, that I know that they all kind of looked at each other like, yes, that's such a key piece of what the story is. And it was so poignant, man. So I met Jenny a year earlier because she was incarcerated at the Chesterfield County Jail in Virginia, and I went and I played a show, and she had an experience with the show, and when she got released, she sent me a Facebook message and was like, you know, if you're ever back in Chesterfield, I want to buy you pizza. and I don't know if anybody that's watching understands how big of a pizza guy I am, but if there's one way to get me to come back to Virginia, although, you know, here I am living in New York, pizza capital of the world, but you know, we ended up just kind of creating this informal correspondence, and I learned more about her and her story, and we thought it was so inspiring. And I'd spent all this time on the road with so many different people and places I never thought I'd go, and experiencing things I never thought I'd experience, and really kind of and touring in a very DIY way where I spent a lot of time just kind of being adopted by people, as I was in their town or their city, and really making these little families everywhere. And I wanted to figure out ways of telling the stories, beyond just writing songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of lined up, and the filmmaker Sam is one of my best friends. We were in film school, not film school. We were in film class together in high school. We went to high school together. And so it's like this amazing way for us to reconnect and kind of do what some of the stuff we were doing, although very different kind of films now than then. But it was really pretty magical, the whole thing.
So post-quarantine, what are your plans for the Just One Foundation and your plans as an artist as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the foundation is... So the fundraiser was successful, and that was really about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago at this point. And that was a lot of work. So we don't have an immediate, new project that we're going to work on, but the documentary was sort of not a pilot, but sort of a prototype in a way. We'd done a smaller short documentary that was about 5 minutes long at the Albany County Jail, but it didn't have a call to action attached to it. So this was kind of a test in a way of something like this. And the response was so positive that, I think that we're going to want to continue to make content, because I would consider that documentary to be, art that serves, art that's created specifically with this idea of like, how do we serve a larger community? How do we serve a larger body of people, in a way that's genuinely substantial and hopefully transformative on some level. I think that we'll do something like that again, and hopefully, on some level with a little bit more of a notch up in sophistication and scope, as things hopefully evolve. And then personally, I'm going to go to summer school.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jody.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice comment that Jody posted.
Yeah, Jody is Jody is like an example of someone that like I made an incredible bond within like the course of 2 days or 3 days. She does a lot of amazing work in Ohio, and she's like one of these people that I feel like I've been sort of adopted by.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jody.
And if you're listening on the podcast, Jody says, "This song will forever be my motivation on bad days and my source of humility on good."
Well, can't ask for much more than that, man. I'll tell you.
Humbling.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mr. Matt Butler, let's end on a positive note. Tell me one thing you are looking forward to. Maybe the first thing that you're looking forward to doing once this whole lockdown is over.
I want to see my mom. I haven't seen my mom in a while. I know she misses me and my brother, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think I want to take my mom out to get some lunch, get some tea or something. I think
That's adorable.
It's true.
Oh, Matthew, one day you're going to make some lady very happy.
My mom,
Yes, it will be your mother. Matt, it is always such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your art and the service that you're providing with it. It really is such a wonderful story. And I'm so glad that you have shared it with us tonight. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me, Steph.
All right. Well, we will see you very soon. Now, where am I now? Hello. Yes. So my good friend, Mr. Matt Butler there. I love him. He's so lovely. Next week on the podcast, Sonia Lee joins me from Nashville. She's an incredible singer-songwriter that I've been keeping tabs on for a couple of years in a totally non-stalker way, honestly. And I know that you're going to love her. So she'll be giving us the lowdown on how Music City and the Nashville community has been creating during this time. So that is next Wednesday at 8 p.m. on our Facebook page. And also, please make sure that you follow our page and join our inner circle. The details are below. And you can find out all about our next guest and our upcoming show in 2 weeks' time featuring our POC friends in our music community. Stay safe out there. I am Stephanie Manns, and we will see you next time.